Fear controls more than just emotions. It controls our money. How many times have you hesitated to invest, start a business, or ask for more? Just because, what if?
Fear keeps people stuck in bad jobs, bad investments, and a scarcity mindset. But what if we could flip the script and make fear work for us?
Today we're breaking down how fear can shape financial decisions and how changing your mindset can change your bank account.
This is the Fi Guys. Let's get into it.
So recently I've been trying to find my best self, right? And to be honest, I say recently as if it's like, oh, this week I've started personal development, personal growth, and really have been on this journey for quite a few years. And one of these things that keeps popping up, and I think our audience can really relate to it, is the idea of like how to overcome your emotional side, how to overcome the fear in life. And those are the two roadblocks I'm currently facing in my own world. And it's something that's like, oh, I'm working. Bam, roadblock appears again. Damn. So today's episode, we will be kind of diving into some tips and tactics from our main man, Chris, to really overcome that hurdle. And if you're someone who struggles with fear, if you're someone who struggles with, letting emotions control you or stopping you in your endeavors, then today's episode is going to be all for you. So with that being said, let's hop in. So howdy, Chris. Howdy. Happy Monday. If y'all are watching this on Monday, happy Monday, Chris. How was your weekend?
Monday. Weekend was great. I'm excited. Last week you posed this question: how do you get over fear? How do you get over emotions? And I was like, well, that sounds like a question that we should probably record and kind of go into it and go deeper. And maybe today's podcast won't be centered around finance, but I think at the end of the day, we can always bring it back to that, especially that fear, that emotion of money. Recently I had a friend that came to me, just a quick story, and he was like, Chris, I really like your podcast. Like, it's really good. But what I need is I really want you to, like, on the podcast or like make a video showing me exactly how to open a brokerage account. Like I want you to show me like what button to click, where to go here. How do I add money there? How do I sell it? How do I do this? And, I had to tell him, like, bro, I love you. And at the end of the day, what's holding you back from learning it yourself? Like, if you need that, me making a video on it, even if I made it, you probably wouldn't watch it. There's something else. There's a mindset thing holding you back, because if I was to tell him, hey, go open a bank account, like, if you have no concept of a bank or anything like that, you wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't know what the steps were. But I bet most people would be like, the first step is probably to call the bank. The first step is to go into the bank. I don't know how to transfer the money. I don't know all that stuff, but we need to break this down into small pieces. And the only way I can know how to do that is to fix the mindset. So first we have to fix the fear. Once you fix the fear, then you can at least take the first step. Because how do you do the whole process? I don't remember. I don't remember every single step. I just kind of do stuff. And then when I get to the next step, I figure it out. And you figure it out and you figure it out. So maybe we can relate everything back to finance at the end. And maybe that triggered something in your brain as to, maybe you're saying like, oh, maybe that's why I'm afraid, because I'm looking at the entirety rather than what I need to do right now.
Absolutely. And I think that for me, at least, it's not so much the problems of the challenge of the task I'm working on, of the stuff that life brings me, that is the issue. It's, well, you got to conquer yourself first. And there's so many quotes. I could pull a million quotes about conquering yourself and, knowing yourself. If you've listened to the podcast enough, you know that we're all about philosophical quotes, especially regarding yourself. And, to conquer oneself is the greatest victory of all, right? And it's also the most difficult challenge, right? So today I'm hoping that maybe we don't conquer ourselves. Maybe we don't win the battle, but maybe we just get 1% better, right? Maybe we can find one thing that we can repeat to ourselves in today's episode that you can keep through months, through weeks, through years, and remember. It's like, I remember that, and that's really helped me. See, for me, with this podcast, certain nuggets will pop out, right? And they'll sit in my brain and they'll just stew in there. And for me, that's been the best help. I've gone through a lot of turmoil recently, and this podcast has actually helped me quite a lot. I remembered when things were going bad, things weren't going my way. I remembered, this too shall pass, right? And I learned it from this podcast. You know, things go up, things go down. That's just the way of life, and this too shall pass, right? And keeping those things in the front of your mind when everything comes crashing down is really what kept me going through the storm. And it's amazing how much you can learn, how much you can grow. I'm just listening to a couple finance guys talking about philosophy, you know, and you know, and truth be told, I don't even know if I want to call myself a finance guy, right? Chris is the finance guy. I'm the student here, right? I just want to be clear on that. But I really just want to fine tune the machine. So, what does fear mean to you, Chris?
You know, I think if I had to put down fear, it was just be not knowing where the story is going to go, or to think that my story is about to go poorly for me and is going to make change. So you can have fear of both good things and fear of bad things. But I think if there's a fear of a good thing, you might call that excitement. But fear of something that you think is bad that's going to change you differently would be trepidation. That would be fear. And again, you're telling yourself a story. You know, if I would say, if I was afraid of the dark, in my brain there might be a story, like a kid. Like when I was a kid, I used to be afraid of the dark, because in my head there was a story that there was something in the darkness that was there that would grab me, would kill me, would hurt me, would harm me in some way or shape or form. Nowadays, as an adult, I'm not afraid of the dark because I don't believe that there is something in the darkness that is there to scare me. That story is no longer playing in my head. Now, you could have the exact same thing. Maybe you're a kid and you watched Monsters Inc. And now that fear of the dark goes away, because now the story is, hey, there's like a happy monster out there who wants to take me on a fun adventure. So maybe that kid who would be experiencing this, two kids won't be experiencing pure fear because they think it's the boogeyman. It's, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer. It's whatever. Jason's hiding in the darkness,
Yeah.
you know, versus another kid whose his story or her story is, in the darkness, there's a friend, you know, who maybe looks scary but isn't scary and wants to take me on this adventure to help me grow and become a better person. And again, it comes down to, it's just a story. It's not reality. It just is. And then it's us creating the story. And then even worse than that, it's us assigning meaning to that story when the story just is. And that's a very Buddhist Taoist concept of things are what they are. And then we assign it meaning. We say if it's good or bad. And I believe it was Horatio in Shakespeare that said, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Things just are. Physical phenomenons just are. And your life is a physical phenomenon that's happening due to causes and conditions to the dawn of time. Everything since the Big Bang, maybe even before that, has led up to this one moment for you to be feeling this fear, feeling these things. You had zero control up to this moment. And you have zero control most likely moving forward. The only thing we believe we can control is how we respond. And even that, I've kind of gone back and forth to think that's an illusion. And even so, I still choose to operate under that assumption, because to operate without that assumption would not serve me. And not to say that that would be good or bad. It would just be, but that's the way I kind of think conceptually through that. So might I ask you, what's holding you back more? You said fear and emotions. I would put fear as an emotion, as like a core emotion.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, there's this, I heard this recently and it kind of hit me. It's a great example of my life where it's like, if you have to go a mile, you'll walk it. If you have to go 2 miles, you'll drive it. Have you heard that?
I've not heard that. No.
So basically it's saying like, if things are slightly bad, you can live with them. If things are really bad, you'll do something about them, right? It's kind of like the guy where it's like, well, I don't like my job, but my boss isn't too much of a bad person, right? You know, I get paid just enough, right? My benefits are okay, but it's livable. You know, it's not horrible. So you kind of just live with it, right?
It's kind of like people only change when the pain of staying becomes greater than the pain of what they're attached to, becomes greater
100%.
than actually doing it.
100%. And, you know, as entrepreneurs, you have to have a high level of fearlessness, boldness, right? If you want to stay as an entrepreneur. And, you know, I know you coach a lot of entrepreneurs. So for me, Fear and yeah, I mean, I guess fear would be an emotion. Fear and comfort are two of those emotions that I struggle with, right? And it's weird because I would say most people struggle with fear, comfort, and pain. And on one hand, it's like, oh, I don't mind pain. You know, I understand pain. So I've got the grasp of that, right? And that might sound very sadistic to some people, and it might make sense to a lot more other people, right? Um, but if I can master pain, maybe not master, but if I can improve how I think about pain and understand that this is part of the process, this is part of the growth, right? I can get benefits out of that. I can overcome, pain. Like, oh, it's we got to go to the gym. It's like, no, it's like we get to go to the gym. We're gonna suffer. It's gonna be fine. Like, waking up really early and going for a run, and like right before you open the garage door, you're like, this is gonna be very cold, and that's okay, right? And going out and doing a 5 mile run. So I know it's possible to conquer these emotions. So I'm just hoping that, like, how do we get past and some of it's fear, some of it's comfort, right? When you get up in the morning, you're like, dude, this bed is the comfiest of the comfort. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. What's the story? I guess that's the real question. What's the story you're telling yourself to
Well, let's go
overcome
back a little bit.
okay,
Let's
yeah.
go back. So you've mentioned this word a few times, conquer. How do I conquer my emotions? How do I conquer my fearlessness? How do
Mhm.
I've quote unquote conquered pain. I want to explain to you the difference between a finite game and an infinite game.
Okay.
A finite game has rules, constraints, and those constraints and those rules are not objective truths. They're intersubjective truths or subjective truths that we as human beings put onto those constraints. So a finite game would be a football game, a baseball game, a soccer match, tennis. These rules, there is a set amount of time, there is set rule sets, there is a set anything, and at the end of it, there is a winner and a loser. It sounds to me like you are trying to put your emotions, your emotions, like how do I become me into
Mhm.
this idea of a finite game? Now, let me explain to you what an infinite game is. An infinite game does not have a winner, it does not have a loser. An infinite game, the perfect analogy I have is science. Science is an infinite game. There, until we are able to know all knowledge, which I don't believe is possible at this point, no one wins science. Now, we're playing infinite games on a finite scale because our lives are finite. We only have so much time here. So my interpretation of that is now, if I'm trying to play an infinite game on a finite scale, my goal isn't to conquer these things, isn't to win, because I can't win. My goal is to advance knowledge. My goal is to help more people. My goal is to continue us on as human beings. And maybe one day, maybe, just maybe, and most likely not, a future person will be able to figure out that game. They'll be able to make that infinite game into a finite game, be able to win. But an infinite game, by definition, cannot be won. So what it sounds to me is you're trying to conquer your emotions. You're trying to take this infinite game. How do I live with my emotions? How do I live with myself? How do I be comfortable with me? And you're trying to make it into a finite place, which is completely natural because you only have, I don't know, X number of years to live.
Mhm.
But again, if you realize that you take this wider perspective of you're not just you, you're, if you like, I've been watching The Three Body Problem recently. It's a show on Netflix that came out a while ago. But one of the big things that they've taken that concept, and it's kind of a Taoist and a Buddhist concept too, is your life doesn't matter. Your life is just a small part of the whole. What actually matters is human beings, it's consciousness evolving. The same thing is you know, if a tree is dying, what that tree will do is it'll actually give its nutrients to all of the other trees around it as it's dying. We all thought that, the law of the jungle meant that it's all selfish. It's all me, me, me. But the more we've realized the interconnected nature of things, we realize that like even the Amazon, trees all share, plants all share, animals share. Like that's actually the nature of reality. But we have taken things to make it selfish because we
Mhm.
put our interpretations of the way the world works. Our brain is inherently extremely selfish, but the world is not. So I guess my question to you is, why do you feel you need to conquer these things? Why not try to work with them and to realize
Interesting.
that they are not bad? Like they just are. You've taken the concept of pain, and in your head, maybe you tell yourself a story that pain is good. Pain is growing. I know I have to go through pain to grow. in every suffering, there is wisdom. Like you've made that connection. That's the story you're telling yourself. But when you get to fear, when you get to emotions, you're like, oh, here's bad things. These are bad. And again, nothing is true or false. Like they just are. You're the one who's assigning it. You assigned pain as a good thing, and you assigned fear and emotions as a bad thing. So at the end of the day, it's you. So let me ask you, what do you think, when you think of pain, why do you feel you conquered that? What story is going on in your head? And you may have to take a second to think about it, because most people don't realize they're telling themselves a story. They think whatever they think is an objective truth, because what it is real to them, it is a subjective truth. It is real to them. But what is real to you is often, if not ever, reality. Because we can't conceive of what reality is. There's multiple levels of truth: objective, subjective, intersubjective, and one that I call like the logos, divine truth, like truth, true truth. But we don't have access to that fourth one. We don't know. We never will. Only God or an entity, or maybe after death, can we know what that is? I don't know. No one can really know. So again, the question was, what story do you have around pain that makes it a good thing to you? Because most people are like, oh, pain bad. If you've conquered that, then, or maybe not conquered, but you found a way to work with it.
Yeah.
You never conquered. Work with. The words we use do have power.
The words we use have immense power. And I think that is that's an amazing breakthrough that you were just talking about. For me, the story I tell myself about pain is, I would say, it's half healthy, half unhealthy, right? On one hand, and maybe you can relate to this, and I think a lot of men can relate to this, the pain is deserved, right? On one hand, the pain is deserved, right? You deserve to suffer for maybe your laziness, for your lack of something, right? It's deserved, right? And on the other hand, this is what I want because I know it'll take me to where I need to go. So there's the two stories that are connected. Rarely do I ever tap into the negative side of that. The first example I gave. But to me, it's like, well, I have flour, sugar, milk, and eggs, right? You mix them together. You have to bake them, right, to make a cake. For me, pain is the baking process. Pain is the development of the cake, the development of the next version, right, to become stronger. And I think I'm not overcoming it. I'm not overcoming the pain. You're kind of shifted my mindset a little bit right there, because it's not like when I go running, it's like, oh, I feel no pain now. I've conquered it.
You didn't conquer it.
I didn't
You've
conquer
worked
it.
with it.
I'm working with it. And that is so prolific. That's so prolific. So rather than conquering my fear, I feel no fear. And it's interesting because we know these things. I know these things. It's like you hear these stories from battle where it's like, gosh, how did you do such a brave act? Weren't you afraid? He's like, I was afraid the whole time. But it's not about conquering it. It's about working with it. And yeah, please
go ahead.
No,
You good. So earlier on, you said that you want to be fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if there's pathology on both sides, being mired in pure anxiety all the time where you can't move forward, pathology. But being fearless, I have no fear, absence of all, pathology. You die in like a second. You'd walk into the street, like, I don't know, you'd be gone in a second. So maybe the goal isn't to be fearless. It's to fear less. It's to realize what things are worth fearing and what things are not worth fearing. Because there are things that are fearful. Like jumping in front of a car should be fearful. Playing with an aggressive lion should be fearful. It actually will. There's a high likelihood that it will kill you. And then the game's over. You've made your finite game is over. Again, the infinite game continues because existence still moves, consciousness still advances, regardless if you're here or not. But how many things in our life, especially nowadays, do we believe are life or death moments? And because our brain can't understand that, again, we have a 10,000-year-old brain in a modern day body. Your brain doesn't know that, oh, actually, all I'm watching is an Instagram video of someone getting punched. All I'm watching is an Instagram video of this or a TikTok or something like that of something bad happening, your brain doesn't understand that. It believes that, oh my God, we're in a war and like I'm legitimately watching this happen in front of my eyes. And the next person that's going to happen to is me. So I'm in a fight or flight response. And, at that point we can go and say like, is it worth watching that? Should you corrupt your brain? I think not. But, people do what they want to do. So sometimes we need to ask ourselves, am I actually fearing the right thing? Instead of being fearful of, oh man, this person, this video is going to come and get me. Maybe I should be fearful of, why do I keep on putting myself in this situation? Why do I keep on watching something that I know isn't serving me? Maybe I should fear that. Maybe I should fear my actions rather than fear the thing in the TV or what the politician said.
It's very interesting. I loved what you were saying there about what are some things we can fear less and fear more. I think oftentimes, at least in my own life, I have extreme confidence in one area and absolutely no confidence in another area. And when I have the extreme confidence, it's purely like delusional, right? But on the other pendulum swing, when I'm completely fearful, that's also pretty delusional as well, right? Picking up the phone, making a sales call. It's like, I'm afraid, man. I'm afraid if they ask me a question I don't know. It's like, that's delusional. You'll be okay, right? It's not a gun to your head, right? Your family's life isn't on the line. But in my own mind, it's like, no, my family's life is on the line. If I can't make these calls, if I can't make these sales, if I can't make the money, right? My family doesn't eat, right? We don't have a house over our head, stuff like that. So,
and just look right there. Look right there. How many steps you just had to take to get from not making this call or making this call and it going well to death. Yeah. There's like all of these things that had to come in between that you are assuming must be true. If I can't make this call, then I must assume that I will not have that. I won't be able, that my job's going to fire me, because my job fired me. I'm going to have to, and this story's happening immediately. So you don't even assume that you don't even know that it's not real. But okay, I can't make this call. My boss hates me. I keep on failing at it. Eventually he fires me. I go and try to apply for another job. No one wants to hire me because I'm such an F up. After that, I apply for unemployment. Unemployment says, no, we're not going to help you there. Then from there, I lose my house. My kid has to, go onto the streets. All these things happen. My wife divorces me. Now I'm on the street under a box, blah, 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 blah. All these things have to happen. And then I die.
Yeah.
But in your brain, it went immediately from, I fail at this phone call, I die. And there's a tangent in there of all of these other stories that have to happen too, that you've taken as truth.
So is it a matter of eliminating going down that rabbit hole?
I don't know if that's possible.
Okay.
For me, and I'm very open about this, like I suffer with anxiety. And I would say anxiety is fear. They're the exact same emotions. My anxiousness is my superpower, and it's my kryptonite. There are both things simultaneously. It depends on which side I want to look at it. I'm the one that gives it that choice. Mm-hmm. And the same thing for you in your fear. Your fear is there because your brain's trying to protect yourself. Your fear is there because your brain knows what is right now. And stepping into the void, stepping into a new place is terrifying for your brain because it doesn't know. It can't predict. Your brain is doing one thing. It's trying to keep you alive. And by doing that, it's trying to predict the future. It's always trying to predict what's going to happen next based off its past experiences, based off knowledge, based off maybe something else. It's all just trying to predict. And every time that you're about to step into the unknown, or you're about to leave the shore, walk into the jungle, whatever analogy you want, your brain will rail against it, saying, I don't know if what is over there is worth leaving here. And until that pain of being where you are is stronger than the pain of what might be on the other side, will you actually jump and do it? But at some point you have to realize, or maybe at some point you can come to the realization that the fear of what you're going towards, of going to the next place, isn't real. It's not real because you're putting a story in your head that if I do this thing, I'm going to die if it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. And there's so many things in life that there are points in life that if you step through this door, the door behind you closes. There are things like that. Death would be the perfect example of it. Yeah. I can't come back from that. It's over. But there are things where it's like, and people might even say, oh, well, if you get a divorce, you can't come back from that. No, you can't. You definitely can. There, you can always step back through the door. Most doors are like on a slider,
Yeah.
you know, and if you don't like it, just open the door back up. It doesn't have to shut and lock behind you. So on those moments that you know that it's a choice that you can go back on, you can always step through, see if you like what's on the other side. And if you don't, go back. But our brain works in either or. It works on a binary state. And it believes like once I make this step, it is what it is. And I think one of the biggest things for me with fear is once you start to feel that fear, once you start to like experience something that you don't like, your brain will take it and amplify it to infinity. You know, oh man, this is so hard right now. I'm scared. And now your brain takes it and goes like, oh, this is our new reality. And it's our new reality forever. And in truth, it's never like that. The moment that you stop doing things is you realize like, oh, it's gone. You know, something that I've done for myself when I was going through depression, going through these things. And I realized like, if I'm just doing something, if I'm being busy, if I'm working on something, the depression's gone because now I'm in the moment and I'm not locked in this story of fear of the past, fear of the future, pain in the past, any of that stuff. You know, you can take somebody who is experiencing the worst level of fear, anxiety, all these things, and given that their eyesight's good enough, tell them to thread a needle. In that time that they're threading the needle, they're not thinking about the past. They're not worried about the future. They're not worried about any of that stuff. They're busy in the task. And then in that moment, you're like, how'd you feel? They're like, oh, I felt fine in that moment. And then they go right back into whatever they're in. They're back into the fear, back into the whatever. And I'm not saying live your life distracting yourself, but maybe sometimes you realizing that these distractions, these things can show you that you're just having an experience that's not real.
Yeah.
The fear you're experiencing isn't real. It's a choice. Maybe not a conscious choice, an unconscious choice, because if it was a conscious choice, you wouldn't be making it, but it's still a choice.
You know, I had to make a really, and I'm going to put this in quotes, difficult decision recently. And, you know, and I put it in quotes because it's not like, are we pulling the plug on, you know, our mother, right? Or do we send her to, like, that's a difficult decision, right? That's a difficult decision. Do I choose between my marriage and the house? Like, that's a difficult decision. To me, this is like a difficult decision, right? And it wasn't that bad, right? So I don't want to compare it to be like, Dom, are you okay? Like, I'm fine. I'm fine. But I had to make a difficult decision that would, in my eyes, embarrass me to people who I didn't want to be embarrassed to. And, you know, I'm a very prideful person. So I that's just who I am. Okay? And the fear of judgment was stopping me from making a decision. And the way I had to change how I had to change how I looked at it, right? And Chris, like what you're saying is it's exactly like what I was kind of the steps that I was going through, right? I had to change the story I was telling myself rather than, man, they're gonna look down on you, man. It's like you know what? No. My life is a Monopoly board. You gotta roll the dice and every step, you know, it's just a move. It's just a move. You're gonna buy this property, or you're not gonna buy this property. You're gonna mortgage this property or not. You're gonna go bankrupt or not. It's just a move. You know, in Monopoly, and that's my favorite game. Everybody knows this. Maybe everybody doesn't know this, but my favorite game. It's just a move. And I had to rewire my brain and really say, like, you know what? This might embarrass me, but it's just a move. It's just a move. If I was playing Monopoly and I had to mortgage one of my houses, my heart rate might increase a little bit, but it's just a move to put us in a better position to win later. And that's kind of the story I had to tell myself in this to get me through it. And I love that because for me, it took a lot of the emotional side out of it. It took the fear out of it. It's like, oh, well, I've done this before. It's just a move. It's just a move. We're just rolling the dice. We're going ahead 10 spaces, right? And what you were talking about on, well, what story are you telling yourself? Because the story you're telling yourself is what's holding you back, usually, right? And I think a lot of us need to sit down and, I don't know if this is a pen and paper. I don't know if this is like in front of a camera. I don't know if this is just meditation, but I think there'd be a lot of great benefit of just sitting down and just being like, okay, I'm afraid of this. Why am I afraid of this? What am I telling myself is the reason why I'm afraid of this? I might maybe public speaking, right? Maybe it's like, I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm afraid of looking like an idiot in front of people. Right? It's like, well, why does it matter that you? Why do their opinions matter? It's like, well, X, Y, Z, right? And just kind of go down the rabbit hole. I feel like too often in today's society we don't use our mind for deep thinking anymore.
Mhm.
And maybe not everybody, but a lot of us. So, what is that
Can I riff on that
conversation?
for a second?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go for it.
So one thing that I'm thinking is all fears in life, and this
Mhm.
is just off the top of my head, but is an estimation that I've kind of known as true, comes down to the fear of death. It all fundamentally comes down to that one last thing, that fear of no longer being here. In my estimation of how the world works, and the reason that like we all suffer is because we have ego, because we have this illusion that we are our own individual entity, that we are special, that we are the main character, that we are all these things. And the moment you're able to let go of those things and even say that, oh, even in death, like I still live on, like I still continue to help the whole, the organism. If one of us survives, we all survive. We survive in that person, in that entity. We are all living. My grandmother, my great grandfather, and people from way back in the day are still living on through me and through you and through our listener and through everybody. No one actually dies. They just get transformed. They transfer to another person. We're kind of doing that. And I'm not talking about reincarnation. I'm not talking about woo-woo stuff. I'm just saying like their behaviors, the person that they were, passed down. Like think about your great grandfather. Most of us never know our great grandfather, never knew our great great grandmother or whatever. That person is impacting you today because that person impacted your grandparent. Your grandparent raised your parent. Your parent raised you. And the line continues on back for infinity of these things. And even if like you today say, like, oh, I don't want to repeat the sins of the past, I'm going to change and be a different person than my parents. Well, then that still great great grandparent caused the the causality to make your parent a bad parent, which made you decide I'm going to change the thing.
Mhm.
Had not, maybe a different story could have played out where you just continued on the line, or maybe you were raised by great parents and then you became the bad parent because good times make bad people. Who knows? I don't know what could have happened, but we're all living all the time. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to fear of death, fear that the self, me, the most important being in the universe, will not be here anymore. So anything, even coming down to like, oh my gosh, I don't have $400 to buy this thing, or my girlfriend left me, or what if people think that I'm an idiot? What if they think that I'm not enough? What if they cast me out of the tribe? And then what happens? The worst thing back in the day that people could do to other people was cast them out. Like that's the reason, like when you watch old movies of like the Romans or back in the day, and there's like someone sins, and you're like, your thing is you are cast out of the tribe. And like we watch that modern day, like that's not that bad. Like I'll just make a phone call, like call a pizza, like go get. Well, back then that was the worst thing that you could do to somebody.
Yeah.
That was worse than certain death because it was certain death in the most painful way possible. So when you're afraid of somebody, you're afraid of looking like a fool in front of these employers. No, once you understand that, oh, I'm telling myself a story about this stuff, and this is ingrained into us. It is a core biological drive to stay within our in group. And unfortunately, in this modern day, we don't really have an in group anymore. We don't have 187 people. I can't remember what it is. I think it's like 87 people who are supposed to be in a band of tribes, and that's how many people our brains can remember in terms of like names and relationships.
Mhm.
And we're taking that into modern day context where I have a Rolodex of 7,000 people in my phone, and my LinkedIn has all this many people, and like all these connections of people that we think are real and like, oh, they love us. But at the end of the day, if shit really hit the fan, I can't call anyone on Facebook to come and help me. I don't care how many likes, posts, or anything like that. The only
Yeah.
people that really matter are the people who are in my true sphere of influence. If those people reject me, even then, there still has to be quite a few causes and conditions that get me to death. Like, even if my inner tribe, my parents, my wife, my best friends, if they all decide like, Chris, we hate you, you're gone, even at that point, it would still be quite a few different things for me to be at death. But why does our brain go, oh my gosh, if my girlfriend left me or my boyfriend left me, I would die. If this happened, I would die. There's so many causes and conditions in between there that have to be true for that death thing to happen. For you, the most precious entity in the universe, to not be here anymore. And you have to also come down to the realization at a deeper level, are you the main player? If you did die, would that end the game? For your game, yes, it would. And I'm not telling anyone, if you were feeling these feelings, do not end it. There's no reason to end it. There are suicide hotlines, call 988, do whatever. Because your life does have inherent meaning. It has inherent meaning because the way that we all grow is together. And you taking yourself out of that, not advancing knowledge, not advancing who you are, is selfish.
So I want to bring it back to more of a daily improvement. Do you have any habits that could kind of strengthen, maybe not necessarily our emotional intelligence, but our storytelling aspect?
Well, I think the first thing for that is you need to come to the realization that you are telling yourself a story. I think that was one of the hardest things for me to get. It took a long time to come to that realization because whenever I had a feeling, an emotion, a thought, I took that as truth because it was so real to me. Like I'm feeling this way. This person cut me off, and now I feel anger. That was so real to me that the only feeling that I could have been feeling was anger. Yet two different people in the same car, maybe two passengers in the back seat, both sitting next to each other. Someone cuts them off. One person's like, "Oh man, I really hope that person gets where they need to go," and the other person loses their mind. So maybe the thing was, it was a story that they were telling themselves about the reason. And maybe the person that cut you off, they have a kid in the back seat that's having an asthma attack and needs to get to the hospital or is choking on something. And in that case, you're like, oh my God, please do whatever you can. Or the other person is telling the story like, oh, this person didn't care. They saw me and they purposely did it because they're just a bad person. Yeah, of course you're going to get angry in those instances. So first, it's realizing that you're telling yourself a story and then realizing that you have the power to control the story. But it was Viktor Frankl who talked about in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response, there is a gap. Between the stimulus that happened and the response of get angry, do whatever I do, there is a gap. And in that gap, that is the story. And if you are fast enough, if you are understanding enough, if you learn enough about yourself, you can interject yourself consciously into that story. And maybe the story already happened and you feel the anger bubble and like, here it comes. You still have the moment to question yourself and say, is this story true? Do I know that to be true 100%? Did the guy cut me off because he knew me and he saw me and all these things and he wanted to purposely put my life at risk? Do I know that to be true 100%? Would I stake my life on it? Would I stake all of my money on it? And if you wouldn't, maybe you can decide, okay, so maybe I'm just telling myself a story and I can choose to do a different thing.
And that's so, I've done that. I've done it before. Interject myself. And I think for me, I don't get angry as much anymore because I can interject myself. And ironically, a couple weeks ago, I'll give an example. A couple weeks ago, I got angry. I mean, I got angry. And it wasn't at anybody, it was at myself, right? And I was just pissed. I was pissed. And I was doing the dishes, right? Where all my anger comes from, because I hate doing the dishes. I hate doing the dishes so much. And I hate using the word hate, right? Because it's not real, right? I don't hate the dishes. They're simply dishes, right? And I saw what I was becoming. I saw what I looked like. I just saw myself in that angry light. I was like, man, I'm tired of this. I'm tired. I give it up. I give up. I give up. I give up the fear. I'm sorry. I give up the anger. Right? And I just told myself, I'm like, this is not who I want to be. An angry person. And I don't think anybody would classify me as an angry person. But it's what I classify myself in those moments that kind of bugged me. So I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done being angry. I'm gonna stop being angry. I give it up. I give it up. And anytime I'm starting to get angry, I take a pause, take a beat, and think, why is this angry? Why does this trigger you? For what purpose is anger gonna solve? I can see why anger might work if someone breaks into my house. I have to defend my family. I can totally understand. I could see why anger would be very useful, right? But minor inconveniences, these little things, it's like, it doesn't serve you anymore. It doesn't serve the purpose.
So would you say that you have conquered anger?
You know, if I've learned anything from this podcast today, it's to choose your words carefully, because your words have meaning, and slight differences have the most drastic of changes. Conquer? No. Because I know that my emotions are an infinite game. I know that they're constantly evolving, and they always will be. But I think I have a better relationship with anger now. I think I have a better process to stop it and work through it and understand it before getting to a place of just complete outrage, right? And I think for me, it's those like little, it's those half beats, those little seconds in between the action and chaos. It's the little steps that I've been able to develop. Like, okay, before I go into full blown madness, right? Let's take a beat. Is madness necessary? Usually not. Usually not. And it's not like I'm Bruce Banner. It's like, nah, Chris, secret is I'm always
I'm
angry.
always angry. Yeah.
No. That's terrible. That's not a hack. That's a terrible way to live.
And to go back to the point
Yeah.
of, did you conquer fear? The reason I wanted you to say that, then no, you didn't conquer fear. You learned to work with it as if it was a friend that was there for a reason. And that friend shows up sometimes in the wrong responses. But sometimes if that friend showed up in the right place, in the right time, you're like, oh, thank God you are here.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing the dishes. Now I'm mad because I'm doing the dishes and I hate the dishes, and I break a dish and now I'm even more mad. Now I'm getting angry. I'm going down this rabbit hole. Yeah, anger is not the place to be there. But someone breaks into your house, they grab your wife. Yeah, anger is the right response. In that story, I want anger to be there. It would be silly for me to pick, oh no, I have conquered anger. You can take my wife. Like I am zen with myself. Like obviously that's, and who knows, maybe there's even a place where you can be like, that you get to take that. I can't think of that. I can't conceive of that in my brain at this point.
Yeah.
But the anger, the emotions you have are real, and your emotions you have are justified in all things.
Mm-hmm.
And you still get to ask the question, is this right now? Is it serving me right now? The more that I've gone through meditation, the more I've realized the story I'm telling myself, that gives you, and the more you realize and start looking at that story, you realize of how many things have to go right and how many places you have the moment to interject yourself. Oh, I lose my job. Now my wife leaves me. My kids are destitute. I lose the house. There was just 3 right there that I had a place to stop. If I lose my job, my wife leaves me. Maybe I accept that as truth. I lose the house. I could have interjected myself right there. Be like, what, do I really lose the house? Like, really? Maybe you accept truth. I lose the house. I'm under a bridge. After I'm under a bridge, I die. You can ask yourself, could I make it under a bridge though? I could probably live under a bridge for a while.
Yeah.
And the more you kind of can play with this, you can realize like there are infinite numbers of places that you can stop and interject yourself and be like, is this true? Do I know this to be true? Do I know it to be divine truth? You don't know what divine truth is. No one does. It's just your objective truth, your singular truth that only you have access to. And if only you have access to a truth, so I decide today, hey guys, I'm a sovereign citizen. This house is now mine. I'm going to start working in Monzon dollars. And I go out and living in that life and go to the store and be like, I'm a sovereign citizen. I can take whatever I want. I'm going to go to jail in 2 seconds. I'm not going to pay tax. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Yeah, I deserve to be in jail but if I tell everyone like, oh no, my truth is this, it doesn't mean anything because it's not an objective truth. And in truth, none of it is objective truth. The only objective truths are that which physics teaches us. And we don't understand that at all. We thought we had an understanding of what physics was. And the more we learn about physics, the more we may have realized that we took the real world and we allowed it, or we assigned meaning to the way that our brains work. But that's not the way the universe actually works. We have zero understanding.
There's something you said 2 minutes back that I really thought was interesting. And I'm not sure if I want to save it and go deeper in it on Friday's episode. But you talked a little bit about how emotions are friends, right? You can call on them when you need them. Sometimes you don't want them there, right? And I would love to go a little bit deeper on that on Friday's episode. I know we're coming to the end of today's podcast, but um, you know, I wonder how many other emotions we had as cavemen, right? Because
Probably less.
you think less.
So when I think of an emotion, in my estimation, is an algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy if then statement. If exponential, if thans, if this, then this, if this, then this, and all of these things all create an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
And since your brain doesn't have access to the black box of all the if then statements, you have an emotion that you can't assign meaning to it. That's why the reason I always talk about we try to assign words to our emotions. What does love feel like? I have no idea. Like, how would you explain the word love? How would you explain what rage feels like? And we say like, oh, it feels like red. It feels like hot. Like, is that really it? Like, love feels like pink and it feels like warm. Like, those aren't synonymous. Those aren't right ways, because it's like trying to describe, like, hey, explain to me blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
is red? Like, I'm blind. Explain to me red.
Yeah.
Like, these words, we have constraints. Yet we believe that our words are divine and they can give us all these things, but our emotions don't play on that system. Our emotions are working on system 1 versus via system 2, via like Daniel Kahneman, or not Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. I can't remember. But there's so many different ways of looking at that. So at the end of the day, Dominic, I think your question was, how do I conquer fear? How do I conquer emotions? And on Friday's episode, I definitely want to go more into emotions and talk about my kind of concept of there are algorithms and there are correct algorithms. Mm-hmm. And the response time might not be the best in the situations. And again, that's because of the story you're telling yourself. So do you feel better about your concept of fear, relating to the fear better and not trying to conquer it? Because if you're relating to the fear of, I must conquer you, I must vanquish you, you can't work with it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a conversation, right? If we go into this podcast and my goal in the conversation is to win, like, I'm just talking at you for an hour, you didn't learn anything. I just talked for an hour and sounded like an asshole and nothing got accomplished. So every time we go into this podcast, I've tried to explain to you more that, like, a conversation, that's the reason I love conversations more than anything. It's an adventure where we're both on the shore, and it's scary. It's scary to turn on these cameras, to get in front of these mics and to be like, and I've had to consciously remember that I'm just having a conversation with my friend. It's not going out to hundreds of people. It's not going to thousands. People aren't listening to it. Because if that was the thing, I would stay on the shore. I wouldn't put myself out there and go on the adventure into the sea to fight monsters together, to learn, to grow. That's what we need. And you need to do that with your fear, with your emotions too. Learn to work with them. It was that old Will Smith quote. The danger is real, but fear is a choice. Mm. Like, the danger is real. Yeah. Going out on your own, seeking something else. That's dangerous. It is. It's a caloric energy expenditure to do anything, to change anything. That is dangerous inherently. But the fear, the story I'm assigning it to it, that's a choice that I get to make. And again, choice is weird because choice means that you can choose to do something else. And I believe that you don't really have access to your unconscious. It's called unconscious for a reason. Consciously, you have the ability to believe what your unconscious tells you. Maybe. I can go deeper on that if you wanted me to. But
I would let's go deeper on that on Friday's episode. I think that'd be very interesting. You asked how has my relationship with fear and emotions changed over the last 52 minutes, right? And it's transformed, actually. It's definitely transformed, because before I was playing a finite game of, I need to conquer my fear, I need to conquer my emotions, to now understanding that, who am I to conquer them? They're friends, right? They're there for a reason. I mean, they've been installed for a reason. It's not just like, here's fear. Why? No reason. No reason. Emotions, sadness, happiness, no reason. Right?
Yeah.
They're there for a reason, and they're not to be conquered. to be worked with.
Yeah, conquered or controlled. The reason I use friends. There's a very good reason I use friends. I
Yeah.
use friends for money too. Like we talk about, you want money to be a friend. It is just a thing. It is a tool. It's a person. It's a person, and you can't control a person. If I had a friendship where I was like, I need to conquer my best friend. Like I just need him to listen to me all the time, whatever, no matter what I do. I need to control him because
Yeah.
I know what's best for him, because I am the right person. I'm the main character in this game and I know everything. That's not a friendship. That's slavery. That's tyranny.
Yeah.
Like that person is not your friend. They're with you out of fear of whatever. The way you love somebody is by letting them go, by letting them be the best version of themselves and knowing that you're always there for them, by wanting what's best for them, irregardless of yourself. That's true love. That's what we want to do. I want people to be in love with their emotions. Even when like me and my wife, I love my wife. And there are times that I'm really, really pissed at her. I love my best friends. There are times that I'm really pissed. I love money. And there's times that I'm really pissed off with money. Same with my emotions. I love my emotions. They serve me in so many ways and they F me over constantly. Same with myself. I love myself and I don't like him because he's an asshole majority of the time, but I still want what's best for him. Even the dickish version of me that is so mean to me and belittles me and all this stuff, I want what's best for him, because if he wasn't that person, he wouldn't do that. Only hurt people hurt people. And unfortunately, the hurt people hurt themselves the most, and then they go and seek out to do it to other people. We're kind of getting off topic again. I'm just going on a riff, but
No, I love it.
yeah, I think you just have to remember that if you look at these things as friends, and friends come and go, right? And the goal is to keep the friends around the table and to know at what time do I want this friend to work with me. You know, I have a group of best friends that I have, and unfortunately, some of us have passed on, and some of us are still here. And you know, we've sat around the table before. We've asked, like, "Hey, if you're in a survival situation, Walking Dead happens, nuclear apocalypse, it's Fallout time. Which friend around the table do you want?" And you know, of course, it'd be like, "Oh, I want this guy, and I want this guy." Like, "Hey, man, I love you." In a survival situation, like I don't want you. Like, sorry, like it is. But then there's other things like, hey, like, you know, stuff's popping off and we need someone to calm the situation down, to be the voice of reason. Well, I don't want the two other guys I want in the survival situation. I want the other guy who I just said I didn't want. And that's how it is with our emotions, with our money, with all of these things. We want these friends around us as a group. And the more that we try to control, to conquer, to say, like, I must win these things, you're trying to control all these things. First off, you can't control them. You're never going to win. They're always going to revolt. And the more that you try to push them down, the same way you push your friends down, control them, the more they revolt, the worse it gets for you. And the more you suffer trying to control something that is uncontrollable. The exact same thing as controlling another person is the exact same thing as controlling, maybe not exact because there's no perfect analogy, but controlling a person and controlling your emotions are relatively synonymous. It's just going to lead to suffering and pain on your end.
I think that's where we'll leave us. I think that's where we'll leave us for today's episode. I love that. That was a really great pod. Do you have any action steps for us today, Chris?
I think for this one, it would be to look and try to see your stories. Try to, when you have an emotional response, something happens. I don't know, maybe your dog barks and you feel like a bodily trigger of like, oh, and you just start screaming at your dog. That happened to me earlier today. And then I had to ask myself a story. Why does that trigger me so much? Why does sound scares me? Why is that? Oh, maybe if I go back in my past and my mom was mad, she threw something against the wall and it made a loud shatter. And I had a fear of like, oh, I'm going to get yelled at. I'm going to get in trouble. And now the dog barks and I have that response of here's this story happening. And I have to ask myself, is that true? Did my mom, when she threw that glass against the wall or whatever, was she mad at me or was she just mad at something else? And even if those things are true, am I in that situation right now when I'm safe in my house and my dog's barking because the UPS guy shows up? None of those things are true. And I had a moment to put myself in there at any point and stop it. And of course, I still reacted poorly. I still yelled at the dog for no reason when the dog was just being a dog. My hope is, and I can say that it does work because it has worked over time, is you get better at that. You get better at that and get better at that and get better at that. And to the point that something happens that is maybe triggering and maybe the trigger doesn't happen. Maybe that fear response of, you know, something goes bump in the night or something happens, something falls and I don't get angry. Someone cuts me off and it's just like, oh, okay. It just is. And I come at it with zero judgment. So my hope for our audience members is to look at your stories and realize first off that you're telling yourself a story. If you think that I'm lying, hopefully one day you can come back to us and understand. Hopefully when it sinks in, come back to us. We're always here for you. I'm not trying to pull people along. We're waiting for you. Do that with your money. Once you realize that you're just telling yourself a story, and majority of that time, that story was formed when you were a child, usually before the age of 7, you're going to have some pretty huge moments. You just keep on exploring, keep on exploring, keep on exploring within yourself. There are no easy answers. There are no shortcuts. It takes time. It takes effort. It sucks. And it's amazing.
That being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, make sure to give it a like and a follow. If you are listening on one of the many podcast platforms that we happen to be on, please give us a 5-star review. It helps us grow and it helps us reach more and more people to create an even better world for the both of us to live in. If you did enjoy it in your heart of hearts and you know someone that would enjoy it too, feel free to give it a share. Maybe a mom, maybe a dad, a best friend, right? With that being said, we appreciate you being here. We really, really appreciate you being here. And thanks for learning and thanks for improving with us. It's a beautiful thing to have more and more people on this journey of growth. For the Fi Guys, see you on Friday.
Later.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.